Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rebecca and Rebecca. We're glad you're here today. It's one of our favorite days when we talk to an author. My name is Rebecca Yager, and I'm coming to you from Dallas, Texas. And my partner in books is Rebecca Reed. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm just fine
Everything
from
going well in
Indiana.
Indiana?
Fine in Indiana, yes. Yes, things are going well. We're track season, well, not season, but we're practicing. So there's more to do, as if I needed more to do. But there's more to do.
Yeah, you have nothing going on in your life right now, really. So. That's it. Anyway, as I mentioned previously, it is one of our favorite days because we get to talk to the authors. And today's author is the lovely and talented and very busy Michelle Shocklee. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We are very glad to have you. And Rebecca and I both really loved the book. I have to put the title up here because I am one of these people that reads on a Kindle. And I know, Michelle, you like the smell of books and you love your bookstore. I read on Kindle and Rebecca usually listens on audio. So we very rarely have a book cover with us. So
It's
it
the
is.
one it's the one like negative of both of those. I kind of get jealous when I see the really cool, bookstagram pictures with the book covers and all that. I'm like, I just have to do screenshots or whatever. So,
So
yeah.
we printed out all we thought we knew, and we'll talk a little more about that. But first, I'm going to embarrass you a little, Michelle, and read your bio so people know a little about you before we dive into our conversation here. So, Michelle has always loved the written word. As far back as she can remember, she'd enjoyed books. Well, you're smart. Um, Her mother, an elementary school teacher, read to Michelle and her four older siblings a lot while they grew up in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains in Santa Fe, New Mexico. After she learned to read on her own, books were a part of her daily life. When Michelle walks into a bookstore, she takes a deep breath, inhaling the wonderful, unique aroma. There you go. So it wasn't a big surprise when she discovered how much she enjoyed writing her own stories. She filled pages of notebooks and eventually computer screens with tales of love, heartbreak, drama, and humor. Although she writes various genres, historical settings are her favorite. And when she's not writing, editing, or dreaming up new stories, Michelle and her husband work as estate caretakers, which means they live and work on beautiful private properties and help the owners with just about any need that comes up. They also enjoy spending time at the beach with their two grown sons and their beautiful wives. And if I recall, your sons are both pretty much newlyweds, newly married.
Yes, one got married last April and the other in May.
Wow.
Yeah, back to back at the same venue.
Oh,
Oh,
really? But
well,
that involved a trip
that's
to Texas, as I recall.
Yes, two trips.
Yeah, but we like when you come to Texas. You just need to stop in and see me once in a while.
Yeah, I know.
Do that. Anyway. All right. So I was surprised myself that when you were a kid, you didn't dream of being a writer when you were little.
I didn't. It never occurred to me. I loved reading. My parents were voracious readers, so books were a thing in our house. So I always loved reading, and I loved writing. That was back in the days before computers. So I loved sending letters to my relatives and friends who didn't live, where I lived, and kept a journal, kept a diary, off and on for the most part. Liked writing assignments in class and in school.
Mhm.
But it never occurred to me to put those two things together to think about having a career. I think probably I didn't have the self-confidence to think that I could probably write a book. So my mom was a school teacher, elementary school teacher. And as I neared the end of high school, My parents were both college educated, and so it was just assumed that all five of us kids would go to college too. And I had no inkling of what I wanted to do, so I went in as an education major, like my mom, because I saw she got the summers off and holidays off, and I thought that's pretty cool. But what I didn't factor in was that my mom had a passion for teaching, and it wasn't my passion. So by the end of my junior year, I knew I was in the wrong thing. So I quit school and I never went back. So I went into the business world, had a family, and it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that the first book idea really came to me and I started working on it.
And you wrote that book longhand, did you not? Did you fill up notebooks with that?
Lots of spiral notebooks. I did it. I was working in mortgage banking of all things because numbers and I don't get along. But I was working in an office, and so during my lunch break, I would get in my car and go sit at a park, and I had my notebooks, and I would just start scribbling out this story. And it was a long story. I probably wrote over 100,000 words in these notebooks. But that was my first foray into actually trying to get a story together. I'm sure it's terrible. I never really got it to the point of putting it on a computer or anything like that. It stayed in notebooks, but it was my first try, and I loved those characters. I wouldn't revisit it again, but it was fun to do.
Yeah, that was my question. Would you bring them back or try to rewrite that story?
I think that would just take way too much work to even try to remember the story. So it would all be brand new anyway.
Yeah, true that. And I don't know if you know that Rebecca is a school teacher.
Oh, really? What grades do you teach?
I teach high school. I teach Spanish. I teach Spanish in high school. So,
Well, bless you.
well, I understand what you're saying about like the passion for teaching because when I got out of high school, that was the only thing I said I would never do.
Oh,
So, I did not major in education when I went to college. I majored in Spanish and political science. No idea what that was going to do for me. Um, at all. But it wasn't until it was late in my career when I actually began to teach. So um, I I couldn't have done it right out of high school. So I completely
Mhm.
understand, the idea that, oh, this is not for me, because that was not for me either at that point in my life. But God, with his sense of humor, was like, I'll just give you some time and eventually, we'll get around to that. So, and I love it now, but I couldn't have done it, at that age. No. So I get what you're saying.
yeah.
I also started writing a book sort of at that same time. Well, I started in college. I wrote, and yeah, it was one of those, it was sort of a Lord of the Rings, Tolkien-ish-esque type story. Yeah, and I probably will never finish that one either because it's one of it would take a lot of work too. So I get what you're saying on both of those counts.
hmm
Yeah.
I think we ought to start a podcast and have everyone dig up all these manuscripts that are hidden away, never to see the light of day, and see what the plot lines are of all of these.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
it might be interesting. Okay, Michelle, with you working full time on the estate, um, not estate planning,
Thank caretakers.
the caretakers. Okay, brain not there today.
That's all right.
Anyway, that working full time, then your writing schedule is obviously built around work hours, and not trying to take away time with your husband either. So how do you balance it all? And what is your writing schedule?
I have no writing schedule. I mean, on the weekends we don't do a whole lot. So Saturdays are pretty much a big, full-blown day of writing for me. Sometimes Sundays afternoons, and I know some people don't like that, but I do write sometimes on Sunday afternoons because I really don't feel like it's work. It's a pleasure for me to sit down and can keep in contact with my characters. So, but if during the week, if the people we work for aren't here all the time, they have homes in other states. And so when they're away, I have a lot more time during the week. I'll get a few things done on the property and then I'll go home and have the afternoon to write or something. But generally, most of my books are completed on Saturdays. And so that takes a lot of writing on a Saturday to get it done because I do one book a year. And there's several months where I'm not writing, I'm just researching because my books are historical with two different historical time periods. So there's a lot of research, but I love it. I absolutely love the research part. So somehow I've been able to make it work. When I was writing my novel, Count the Nights by Stars, the woman we were working for is still part of the same family, but she was elderly and she required a lot more of our attention. And so I would get up really early in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. And so I prayed, I was like, Lord, just wake me up at 5 o'clock. If you wake me up at 5 o'clock, I promise I'll get out of bed and I'll go write. And he did. Like every morning I was awake at 5 o'clock, and that never happened. And in the evenings too, I would go ahead and just after work, grab a bite to eat, and then I'd go up to spend some hours in my office. That was how that book got finished. I hope I never have to do that again. But really no schedule, just write when the opportunity presents itself, and hope I hit my deadline when it comes.
Mm.
Well, I was curious about your method because of the dual timeline. We've interviewed a few other people, and it's always interesting to me to see how people put their books together. I think it's such a unique thing, and I'm curious as to your methods and how things come together for you.
I write the book straight through. I start at the prologue and I write straight through chapter by chapter. Somebody asked me the other day if I write, one story from this time period and then this other story and then try to mesh them together. And I think that would be a nightmare trying to mesh them together, because oftentimes when I finish the historical chapter, a little bits and pieces can lead into the next chapter that's going to be the more contemporary period. So I do write straight through. I've never been one of those can do hit or miss chapters or anything like that.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
go ahead.
We do that a lot.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a question, Rebecca?
No, I was just I think I agree with you. I feel like it's harder to do like a scene here, a scene there, and then kind of piece them all together. But I do know people who do that. It fascinates me how they do it, but like I'm totally with you as far as like writing it straight through seems the most logical way to me.
Mhm.
Um, but I think this book is unique because even the contemporary timeline is not super contemporary, right? You've got two basically both historical timelines here. You've got your World War II, which is fairly common, but then the Vietnam timeline, which I thought was fascinating. I thought, and the all of the things that pulled in that you were able to then use, especially with Maddie's character and how she just that time fit her so perfectly because she had so much anger, and there was a lot of people in that had that, and I thought you just did a fantastic job of using those social issues to really show us her character and her anger and just just her she was just so bottled up, and it's I kept seeing her as like a bottle with a cork in it, and it was just like all that stuff was just in there, and it just she tried to like forget about it, but she never would uncork the bottle until eventually at the end she was able to do that with the letters and reading through what her mom wanted to read. I thought that was fantastic how you did that. Um, was it difficult to kind of balance, the two sides? Because you really did a great job of that as well, like getting both the hey, we don't think our soldiers should be in Vietnam versus the hey, the soldiers are heroes, that idea. How did you kind of come to that ability to do that? I thought because it was fantastically done.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And those two wars were so completely different. And, as a historical nerd, I love digging into the details of things like that. And my dad was a World War II vet. So World War II is a very, it was something we had lots of books on, and I read a lot about, watched a lot of movies and things. But I grew up in the 60s and 70s when Vietnam was going on. And so they were just so completely different. And that was what I really wanted to portray in the book. But I knew I had to do it with characters who had very strong emotions towards, one side or the other, especially in the Vietnam story. And Maddie, the very first time I wrote chapter one, I thought, oh, I got to the end of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to hate Maddie because she is just she's this firecracker just ready to explode on anyone who comes near her. But she just needed to be that way. She needed to express what a lot of people were feeling during that era. There were protests, there was violence, there were violent protests. And so I wanted to kind of put all of that into Maddie's character, and yet we have to have her come to a place where it's just like you said, the cork comes out and it's just got to come out. And she can't keep that inside of her. So I wanted that to be her journey. But for the World War II, that's my dad's era. That was my mom grew up in that era too. And so it was a special thing to write that story because their story wasn't Ava and Gunther's, obviously, but little bits and pieces of my mom and dad's growing up and dad going off to war and things like that. That's in the story too. So I really enjoyed working with both of those time periods.
Yeah, it was really good. What I think Rebecca and I both commented on too was as far as World War II history, which we all seem to know a lot about, never occurred to me that Germans were being interred like the Japanese were, the internment camps that happened here in the United States. That was brand new knowledge and kind of blew me away. And it's like, well, yeah, if the Japanese were, I guess it did make sense. You handled things so well, and we learned things with that. But was
That's
that new to
good.
you when you researched that?
It was very new to me because when I started to think about what my next book would be, I knew I wanted it to be a World War II home front book. I didn't want to take people over to Europe. There's so many books already doing that. And so as I started to research what was going on here in Tennessee during World War II, I happened upon the information about Camp Forest. And it started out with that the German POWs had been held there. And I was like, oh, I just didn't think about German POWs being brought over here, but that makes sense. And then as I dug a little deeper, it came to the German enemy aliens were housed there first. And I was like blown away like you guys, because I knew all about the Japanese internees, and growing up in Santa Fe, that was where one of the camps was, and obviously it was before my time, but I knew about it. And I've seen movies about Japanese internees, but I had never heard that Germans and Italians were as well. So that whole thing was very fascinating to research. I have several books that are stories of people who were Germans who were here in the country and they were arrested. And so a lot of those stories is what you're reading in Gunther's story. It's just kind of a mishmash of all these other stories of people who actually went through that. So that's what Gunther's story is.
Yeah, it was very intriguing to read that. And I think I'm not a huge World War II fan, and I think that's why, because there's been so much written about it. But this was such a different twist on it, and some information that I hadn't, like Becky said, we had no idea. And it was just fascinating to
Yeah.
read about it, and sad, very sad as well. Because you always think, like, how could this happen? And people say that about World War II as well. Like, how could people just look the other way? But honestly, it's a lot easier than we think to do
Yeah.
that, I think. And especially in a time that has such heightened emotions with it. There's so much to worry about besides what's going on down the road to these people who are fighting against us, or
Yeah.
at least we assume, we just,
Mhm.
lump them all in there. And
Mhm.
yeah, so that was amazing. And you did a great job with your timelines as far as pulling those threads together. And really, that I think having these two close timelines was really cool in a way, because you could do things with them that you couldn't do with the ones that are spread further apart. So that made this book really a unique story as well.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear.
No, yeah, enjoyed it. And I'm a military brat. In fact, you and I have New Mexico roots because I spent a lot of
Yes.
time in Albuquerque when my dad got stationed there, and my father went to Vietnam. So I thought you portrayed that very well, how difficult it was for the soldiers who came home and weren't
Thanks.
always treated nicely.
Mhm.
And it was
Mhm.
just a rough time, but getting back to Maddie, yeah, when you start the story, it's like she is almost unlikable, but she is going home to see her mother. So you are showing, yeah, she's got a soft heart. She's gonna go, go see mom.
Yeah.
It comes home when she's called home, and yes, she has a lot of anger, but the way that character arc, I thought, was amazing, where she still held on. We don't do spoilers, and it's so hard sometimes because her arc, she still kind of held on to her beliefs. She didn't like the war and things like that, but she also got to see a little bit of a different side.
Yeah, yeah. And I had to remind a reader recently because they were a little bit frustrated that Maddie didn't have a deeper change by the end of the book. I was like, well, it was just 6 weeks, we're talking about just a 6 week period here. People don't change that much in 6 weeks, but I felt like she did well.
I felt like she changed a lot,
Yeah.
because she didn't. What I actually, this is another thing too that was really unique, is that, a lot of the times when people change, they actually change their beliefs too. She did
Yes.
not change
No.
her core belief about the war didn't
Mhm.
change,
Mhm.
but her perspective
Mhm.
changed. And
Yeah.
that's huge, because we don't understand how important our perspective is on something. Just because you believe something, that's one thing, but like, you have to be able, she was able then to see it from more than one side, and she was
Yeah.
not able to do that at all at the beginning. And so I thought her attitude completely flip-flopped,
Good.
and she let go of the anger. Now
Mhm.
it was just it was directed at what it maybe should have been in first place, which was the just war in general is bad,
Yeah.
right? And then she was able to see the soldiers as human, because I don't think she did at first.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah. So
Thanks.
it was a good change. Sorry to interrupt,
Good.
just because we don't automatically change our belief systems or
Right.
change so I don't know. I thought it was real.
Good.
Me too.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what I try to do with all my characters. There's just a growth, and because that's what all of us do. We're all changing, we're all growing, and that's what I try to portray in my characters.
Mhm.
Well,
Um,
it's a good lesson to learn too, because I think we do have a tendency as authors sometimes to want to really just redeem every piece of the person in that whatever period of time the book takes place. And sometimes it's just not realistic, like you said, especially on a short turnaround time like Maddie had there. It's, we're only going to be able to change so much at a time. So I thought, that's a good lesson as a writer, to remember that you don't have to fix everything
Right.
about the person,
Hmm.
or is it even broken, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just because she has a different opinion doesn't mean it's wrong
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah. Just the
So,
way she expressed it might have been a little wrong, but she
yes.
had to learn that too.
but you leave with that sense of hope that
Yeah.
she has changed her perspective and what she's gonna do with that down the road. I don't know, you're full of optimism. All right, but let's the World War II story with Ava and Gunther. I like Ava. Talk about, you don't think about this anymore in this day and age too, where she's a young war widow. Where is she going to go? When she
Yeah.
has a family, so she's with her mother-in-law that she didn't know on a farm that she didn't know.
Yeah.
Just, I bet she showed such strength of character and but such patience and such kindness to her mother-in-law, who wasn't always the nicest person.
No. No.
Yeah.
But when I was writing Ava's character, I didn't base her off of any specific person, but I just feel like, and this is a very general blanket kind of comment, but I feel like women of that era were just so strong. I just feel like the when people in my own family, my grandmother and my aunts, and they all lived through that, and they all have memories of not just the World War II, but Great Depression. And I just feel like there's so much strength in those women, and they endured things that I can't even begin to imagine enduring. And so Ava is a bit of all of these women that I've watched, and you're right. She faced all the stuff that I gave her like a champion.
Well,
Yeah.
and she was even strong enough to make a decision against someone who could have provided her with a better life,
Yeah.
in the story too. And she's going, wait, well, that's even not quite right for me, even though she could see a better life for herself, but it wasn't her life, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was that sacrifice for love. She wanted to be married for love. And if he wasn't going to be it and Gunther never came back, well, then she just wouldn't ever have it, but she didn't want to settle again.
Hmm. Well, I think that's true. I mean, you had the precedent because you're very clear that she was not in love with her first husband. She loved him, but she wasn't in
Yeah.
love with him, and
Mhm.
she liked him, and thought that they would be fine together, and she would grow to love him. But then, of course, she didn't have that chance.
Yeah.
So I think because we had that to begin with, we were able then to really accept her choice later. And it made sense and it felt right because we'd already had that in our head that, okay, she did this once already. It's not like,
Yeah.
so it's not just coming out of the blue. She already knew that wasn't the right thing for her.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. So how difficult was it to write like Gunther's POV, which was a really fascinating perspective to put in the book? The character of him, they're knocking on his apartment door and he's going to be
Yeah.
led away, and his doubt.
Mhm.
I mean, just what he went through.
Mhm.
It was great to hear his thoughts and be
Mhm.
in his brain through the book. That
Yeah,
must
when
have
I
been
go
difficult.
ahead. Yeah, it was, but it was writing his story was probably my favorite. I loved writing his story, probably one because that history was just so new and fresh to me. It wasn't anything I'd ever studied before, but I have found recently that I have a lot of German. Well, I've always known I have a lot of German ancestry, but yeah. And so I've really kind of been connecting to that end. My father's family's Hispanic, so I've always had all that growing up in Santa Fe and all that. But my mom's family was German. And so when I realized that German people were being, arrested right after Pearl Harbor, I just felt this real connection to them. And so as I was digging deep into their stories, first of all, I was like, oh, I wonder if I ever had, somebody related DNA-ish who went through this. I don't know that, but I kind of took Gunther as my own. He kind of became my Gunther. And so writing his story was fascinating, but it was really hard because I knew all the things that he was going to have to go through. And especially when he went up to North Dakota and all that happened up there. Don't want to give spoilers on that. But like I said before, all of the things that Gunther went through are actually things that real people went through. And so I really am grateful that that storyline came to me because I really loved the character of Gunther.
Well,
Yeah.
we also loved him. And again, the emotional impact of what happened to him, I thought really set the stage for his, well, and how he reacted to it. He just, of course, he was confused. I mean, who wouldn't be? But the strength he showed as well, with his ability to just kind of bear with all of it, right? I mean, he was angry, but yet he didn't
Yeah.
become violent or any of that. He was trying to survive. He wanted to survive. And he just all along was like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything, and which is normal for somebody for this, and it just made you really think about all the people that this happened to and all the lives that were disrupted because of fear and panic,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, and they could never go back to their life that they left. They were held for the entire war, and some of them even a year after the war. And so, their lives were totally, totally stolen away from them. So they had to start from scratch.
And it makes what we find out later in the book really come home, when we find out his story of what happened to him later, and the fear that really was embedded deep into his heart that this could all be ripped away again, everything he had later that he built again. And it makes the whole twist that you wrote really impactful, I think.
Good. That was what I was going for.
Yeah.
You did
Oh,
good. Can you tell we liked this book, Michelle?
I'm so glad. I'm so pleased. Thank you.
No, really, I thoroughly just enjoyed it and didn't want it to end. It was one of those where even though I was all happy, I still wanted to keep going with them.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. And the ending made me want to stay with them even more because I really enjoyed the very end of the book and what Maddie was able to do and that whole ending. Yeah, that was fantastic. And
Good.
this is not the last book in the series, correct?
Well, they're not a series. They're all standalone books, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So not a series, but still, you have another one coming out soon?
It will come out in September.
Okay.
So,
Do
yeah.
you have
This year.
any detail? Do you have title, cover, anything like that, or nothing yet?
I have not been able to reveal the cover or the title just yet. Hopefully in the next week or so, I'll be able to do that. But I will tell you and your listeners that of course, it's another historical split time because that's what I write. And this one is going to be set in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Now, the reason why it's in Oak Ridge, and a lot of people might know this and a lot of people might not, is that Oak Ridge was a secret city like Los Alamos during the war,
Oh.
which I didn't know that until we moved to Tennessee. Oak Ridge is where all the uranium for the bomb was enriched. No other place, just Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So there was a huge, huge plant, actually three different plants that were built in Oak Ridge, nobody knew it existed. About 75,000 people lived there and worked there, but nobody knew it existed. Just like Los Alamos, nobody was supposed to know it existed. So my character May is a young woman who goes and works there because most of the employees were women. So I'm excited to share this book.
Sounds fantastic. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah,
It is. It is. Like I said, I grew up in Santa Fe. Los Alamos was like a stone throw away. We knew all about, Los Alamos. My grandmother saw the white flash of the temporary bomb. I mean, not the temporary bomb, but the test bomb.
Test bomb.
That was, yeah. What was it called? Trinity. There we go. The Trinity test. If you watched the movie Oppenheimer, the Trinity test was done out in the desert of New Mexico. My grandparents lived about 50 miles away. My mom was a teenager and grandma was up. She was at the kitchen window and she saw this white flash, felt the tremors, and then it all went away. And of course, the government lied to them and said it was an explosion at a military base. For years and years, they believed that. So I've known all this stuff about the atomic bomb, but I'd never heard of Oak Ridge's role in it. So I'm very excited to share this story with everybody in September.
So September
Great.
can't come quick enough.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, do you have a newsletter? Give us your website where people can, keep up on the news about this book
Yeah.
and any other forthcoming books. So,
I'm very, very lax in getting newsletters out.
okay,
So
sorry.
people should probably just follow me on social media. They can find me, author Michelle Shockley, on all the socials. I do have a website, michelleshockley.com, and I am going to try to keep up my blog a bit better. So that will probably be where I will do the giveaway when I do get to do the cover and title reveal here in another week or so. So I'll be doing a couple of giveaways, so people should probably stay tuned to my social medias.
Okay.
That sounds
Yeah.
great. Well, anything else for her, Rebecca?
No, I definitely recommend this story, and it sounds like we all need to be looking up the other Michelle Shockley offerings that are out there as well, because it sounds like they're all pretty fascinating. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to the next one in September as well. Um,
Yeah, well, we'll
yeah.
give it a shout out when it comes out.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. So, of course, well, Michelle, we certainly appreciate your time and appreciate you writing such an interesting book. So we really can't wait to read more. And of course, you have a pretty good backlog, Appalachian Song and the Count one. Sorry, I'm so bad with titles.
That's okay. Count the Nights by Stars and Under the Tulip Tree.
There you go.
That's okay,
But-
Becky.
Yeah, Appalachian Song is the next. I have that already on my I've already got it. I just haven't had a chance to
Good,
listen to it yet. That's my next one. So
good. Well, I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure it sounds fascinating too. As I read the back cover, it's like, yeah, I like these kinds of stories. So
Yes. Yeah. That's a sweet one too.
Well, that's good. But anyway, but for right now, pick up All We Thought We Knew by Michelle Shockley and follow her on social media so we can get updated on her September book. And actually, by the time this podcast airs, we'll know what it is. We may throw the cover up
Yes,
here
yes, that'd be
at
fun.
that point, but we're not going to do it, just in case can't have anything released out here yet. But we're excited. Again, Michelle, thank you for your time and for being here. And yeah, we just appreciate you. And next month, Rebecca, we are going back to World War II. I need to tell you.
we are. Yes, we are, but in a quite different way.
with Sarah Sundin. And
Mhm.
it's the Scottish. I got to get the title. See, I am getting very,
Something
very
about on a Scottish shore. What is
Midnight
that?
on the Scottish
Midnight.
Shore.
That's it.
That's
Midnight on the Scottish shore.
Midnight on the Scottish Shore with Sarah Sundin, and she's going to join us, and we're excited about that. So we hope we will see y'all here next time. In the meantime, go to RebeccaandRebecca.com, see all our social media links. We're on Instagram, Facebook, we have YouTube, Spotify, all the places, but you can start at RebeccaandRebecca.com. But and when you do that, go to michelleshockley.com or follow author Michelle Shockley on social media so you can be up to date on her next books as well. So thank you again for being here. And until next time, we will continue to love books and we'll see you soon.
Bye.